Hi, I'm Diana Feuerbach. I'm happy to host today's B3 Artist Talk with Federico Solmi and Guido Segni. Federico, you're joining us from New York City, correct?
Yes, correct. Brooklyn.
And Guido is joining us from Tuscany in Italy. He wouldn't tell us more, so it's a bit secret. We have two topics to talk about: truths, which is the B3 festival topic, and Dadaism, not to be confused with Dadaism, the German expressionist movement of more than 100 years ago, but still lingering today, and maybe in the British pronunciation, Dadaism, which Guido is going to tell us more about in a little bit. I would first like to introduce the two gentlemen. Both are Italian, so if it weren't for me, the two of you could have a wonderful chat in your mother tongue, but for my sake and also for the audience's sake, let's speak in English and still try maybe to be a little Italian if you want to, every once in a while. Federico is no stranger to B3. You are pretty much an old-time favorite of the festival. Wow. You were first invited in 2015, correct?
Yes.
And in 2017, you did a huge installation. Whoever is not acquainted with Federico's work, he makes, just in a nutshell, animated drawings. He loads them into games engines and he creates the most spectacular big-scale video installations, mostly on historical themes, political themes, with biting sarcasm and a lot of dark humor. And in 2017, Frankfurt had a big video installation all along the facade of the Schauspielhaus, right? The major theater. And maybe we'll talk a little bit about that project. It was called The Great Farce, even though you're showing a new one in this edition of the B3 Biennale. Guido, on the other hand, is new to B3. He turned in a wonderful CV that I would just like to read a little bit. With a background in hacktivism, net art, and video art, Guido Segni lives and works somewhere. Just right now, it happens to be Tuscany. Online and offline, playing with art, internet culture, and data hallucinations. Mainly focused on the daily abuse or use of the internet, his work is characterized by minimal gestures on technology, which combines conceptual approaches with a traditional hacker attitude in making things odd, useless, and dysfunctional. Guido, what about this traditional hacker attitude? Can you tell us a little more?
Oh, yes. I mean, just that I like to put hands on technology, even though I haven't the right background. So I think that we need to put the hand on technology and try to make things, and not just follow the instructional manual of a technology. That's what I mean for hacker attitude. Just this.
Federico, what's your attitude?
My attitude? Well, about data and all of these.
No, I mean, if you were to maybe your artistic attitude, if you had to put it in a nutshell, as Guido is doing with his.
Well, my attitude is to fight the hypocrisy of not just from the power structure and the political leader, but people don't realize that a lot of hypocrisy comes also from the art establishment and from the ruling class. So to me, we can discuss later, but the issue is not always the political class. It's also the stupidity of the average people that they fell in love with their with who control the power. If you think about how people love Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg from Facebook, I always see them as as people taking advantage of us, never as a hero. So now, United States, there is this Netflix show, Social Dilemma. Everybody, they are shocked. They're all, scandalized about what people are doing, what these corporations do with their data. So I just say, man, wake up, wake up before they put in your face, So.
So it sounds to me like you're mostly a seeker of truth, which makes you a perfect guest of B3 Biennial again.
Or just open the eyes. Me and and him, we just have our eyes open. It's not we're trying to discover some kind of like scientific formula. We just rebel to what is being they're feeding us. So with lies.
So maybe this year, 2020, has sort of accelerated certain things that were happening before, things are sort of have been spiraling out of order pretty much. I mean, we get the news over here in Germany, and I'm sure you do in Italy too. We see shocking images, and you're sitting there and you're thinking, this can't be true. And I myself, I lived in the US for 5 years. That was in the late 90s, early 2000s, and it was a much different time and a much different country. I'm almost glad I'm no longer there. How do you, have you started, have the two of you maybe even started to develop artistic ideas on how maybe to channel current events into some sort of artistic expression or project? Federico, maybe first. Or does it take a much longer time for you to process current events and then find your mode of expression?
Me, him?
You.
Me. Well,
You.
I think like a great artist should work ahead of time, So in fact, I start to, this campaign of like working on American history and to try to, show to the world, how corrupted is the history of the United States and how it's been manipulated and misled. And I started 5 years ago, before Black Lives Matter and before I did, this movement of decolonization, And to me, a great artist has the sensitivity of understanding before the average public the direction of what, humanity is taking. I remember, in 2013, I was working in this video trilogy entitled Chinese Democracy and the Last Day on Earth, and people will think I was mad. And then, 7 years passed, all of this liberal democracy that were ruling Europe and they were ruling the United States, that they are turning into political right-wing and extremist, government. So that's, I don't look for the immediate reaction of what's happening today, So I think in order to understand, what's happening today, you have to have a deep knowledge of human behavior and history, and then based on this analysis, you determine where society is going, So, to me, what's happening today is a result of a really messed up history of this country, with the terrible injury and lies that have been going on for hundreds of years, no matter what, even if I love to be here, because I love to be in the United States, but if the country is deeply sick, into its roots.
So basically, for you, it's important to always look at the bigger picture of human history as we know it, or as we are being told it.
Absolutely.
Right? Because then you try to forge your own versions of historical truths in your works, and it's always fascinating to watch. Guido, looking at your work, it seems like you're more rooted in contemporary times. For you, technology is important, the internet is important, big data plays a role. So those are more current occurrences in the human existence, correct? And you're focused on that, or is it that you also take a broader view on humanity and its fate?
I grew up in the 80s with commercial television in Italy, and then in the early internet with the big utopias. The utopia of freedom and the internet of free place. I remember very well the experience like in the media where the movement thought that the internet could be a possibility of emancipation from media dictatorship or other situation. Then for me, that I grew up with the internet, it was so natural to work with this medium. Data is a way to tell stories today. I mean, we always everyone look at television and look at the pandemic data, for example, and we are all looking at data as contemporary stories. So for me, data is an artistic material that allow me to try to tell stories. So that's my background and why I'm using this kind of technology. Then said that, I can say that maybe I'm not so good in doing spectacular things in art. That's why I always prefer to have in technology. I mean, to put a distance between the artwork and the spectator, and not trying to put the spectator in an immersive story, because I prefer to make I'd calling it algid artworks, because I want that the spectator try to understand, try to move a critical think, and try to understand the enigma that's behind a work of art.
Mm-hmm. It makes me laugh because of course I looked at some of your work, and the one that in my view is the most blatant is a project that you did 7 years ago already. It's called the Middle Finger Response, and on your website you have images of, I mean, in a gallery it looks like, and there's a huge wall. It's all covered with photographs of people making that middle finger gesture, which I'm not going to repeat right now, but that everyone is familiar with. And tell us who were these people and why did you ask them to be part of this project?
Well, this work, I think, can fit also the topic truth, because at that time, I mean, it was 2013, I moved some experimentation in some digital platform like Amazon Mechanical Turk or Fiverr.org. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to explore the new form of digital labor. And so what I did was quite easy. I subscribed to Amazon Mechanical Turk, and I asked to Amazon Mechanical workers to show themselves in front of their webcam and to show their middle finger response. I didn't ask anything else, and so I collected all these pictures that I paid for. I mean, it was 50 cents, dollar cents, and then I put all these photographs together. I didn't do nothing. I just paid for that, but the collection, I think it is quite meaningful because it shows what were the conditions of these people that were working from home often, but also from the terrace, from anywhere, with their computer, and for very, very low wage fee, let's say.
Well, why do you think they were so eager to participate? I mean, if someone were to offer me 50 cents and say, take a picture of you showing this response, I probably wouldn't do it, or I would want to know more. How did you convince them?
This was in US? Was in the United States?
Sorry?
Guido, was in the United States? United States?
No.
Ah.
From Italy. At the time, I wasn't allowed to do that because only from the United States it was possible to that. But that's not the question. To answer to your point, I think that people did that just because I paid for that. I don't think that there is any other reason. Maybe they liked to show their middle finger response to the person who was paying them, but I don't think that there is any other reason.
But what's interesting is that you're using the term frontier. You're saying you like to explore the new frontiers of digital labor. Now, Federico, on the other side, he creates works that show frontiers of times past many times, like the Christopher Columbus, Hernan Cortez, and others explorers reaching the New World. And that was the frontier back then, or maybe the American frontier. But it's interesting that this term is popping up again. Maybe there's always a frontier, and we don't always quite realize at any given moment where it is right now and what it is. And maybe digital labor is definitely one, and maybe have other new frontiers out there. But maybe to talk more about current events once more. Federico and also Guido, how are you feeling? Where's the frontier right now? What things would need to happen that we can, as societies, that we can sort of calm down again, especially in the United States?
Well, I think what Guido said is very interesting, and not many people remember this, especially the younger generation. The reason because the internet was born and the cyberspace was born was really to try to escape from the government, to create a sort of like hippie utopia in which people can share things and then 40 years have passed and this new frontier became the most authoritarian, tools that a government can spy on us, can, use us as, advertising to collecting our data. If you think about why I'm so obsessed with the colonization of United States, which is the place in which I spend my adult life, the last 20 years of my life, is very simple to not very distant from what Guido I think is doing. So basically, America for me, if you look at the history, was a sort of like a Garden of Eden before the arrival of the colonizer, the white explorer, the white exploiter at the end, and it just took 30 years to completely destroy, an entire civilization that was there for millennium, So the reason because I'm so obsessed about this matter is because all of the violence and all of this lie and all of this atrocity that they start, with the white man arriving to the new world, they're still the same issue that are afflicting this country, I connect, this lack of truth, this sort of complete atmosphere of lie and that is contemporary American today is not very different from the attitude of the aristocrat founding fathers that in the history book they appear as benevolent souls that are saving the savage from their ignorance and from their lack of religion, all of these kind of point, they're still present in the struggle that is today the world. I often think and talk to my kids, but can you imagine how beautiful will be like a civilization that adore nature. They listen to the environment, and once the European man come to the United States, it was all about profit. It was all about the people that we are about, So, and these things that they're still there, this nasty principle, they're still there.
So it's a question of narrative, because what you criticize is the sort of narrative that is being told to kids in school books and maybe by politicians. So what you're deploring is a blatant lack of honesty when it comes to talking about history. In your current work that you're showing at B3, American Fable, we have images, for example, of, I think it was Hernan Cortés and Christopher Columbus sitting on Aztec thrones in the Mexican capital of Tenochtitlan. And you have the indigenous masses around them cheering them on and celebrating them. And of course, it's completely distorted. I mean, you take it over the top because art can do that, and to make truths appear, you can totally exaggerate, and then it becomes all the more believable. And what always strikes me when watching your work is that on the one hand, I want to laugh because it's really, really funny, but on the other hand, I'm like, oh, this is bad. Oh my God. So
it's not fun. Well, listen, again, I think this is a great panel to put two artists so different, so similar, like myself and Guido. He analyzed data that, is a more scientific, probably aspect of his work, but history and the few real history documents that you can find is the only data that we have about what really happened. Because if you want to look for the letter of Christopher Columbus, you can find them, But then you realize that, man, what happened, what they tell us in the history book are really, really different from what, there are in these documents. So basically, it's not that I'm inventing anything. I simply, translate into image what I believe is really happened into, in this particular historical moment, But yes, of course, sarcasm and irony is a way to kill the tragedy of this specific event. I don't know why. At the moment, I'm really taken, and I can detach myself from these topics. It's been several years, and somehow at the moment I'm still pretty obsessed. I know very soon probably it's going to end. But I have an obsessive personality. Until I see new material, I keep digging it. So.
Guido, are you an obsessive personality as well in your artwork?
Why? No, absolutely not.
No.
No.
It's more calm.
Yeah. I have many identities, but not so obsessed. So yeah, more calm. Yeah, you are right, Federico.
More laid back.
Sorry?
You're more laid back than Federico.
Yeah.
More relaxed, as you said.
Yeah.
He lives in a nicer environment. He's in the hill of Tuscany, surrounded by Chianti. I live in a war zone here.
Yeah, especially and yes, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, probably New York City was pretty hard hit, and without going into details, I mean, if you'd like to share a little bit, what was it like, and what is it still like, for you and your family? And
probably it's not fair to say that I live in a war zone, because we live in a beautiful house on the hills outside the city, But the fact that I come every day to Brooklyn, where there is tension, racial tension. There is a lot of obviously suffering, and I drive every day to this place. You really see how miserable could be New York, in a moment like this, And for me, I'm just coming to the studio, get my things done, and go home. Like, you know, so I'm not mingling with all of this. But what is the war zone is the atmosphere that is here. You know, the atmosphere of like social, racial tension. There is a very incendiary climate of extreme left and extreme right. So there is no more the center. Like,
the middle ground.
What?
The middle ground is crumbling.
It's crumbling.
And people are left to the extremes. Yes.
Which means, if you think about it, it means also was a failure of the social, liberal democracy, because otherwise people, they wouldn't go extreme left or extreme right. Something must have happened in the center. People were very dissatisfied, like, you know. So, well, we can go on and on for 4 hours. So, but anyway, that's the result. Like, you know, a really unrecognizable country that you know is it can go on fire in a second. Like, you know, it can go to complete degeneration, like, you know, in the next 20 days with the election. So no matter what, if the right win or the left win, same thing. You're going to have extreme right doing violence and extreme left probably doing other things, you know. So not a good picture. But art, and for artists, for us, we're going to keep going and, keep our mind busy with doing what we're doing, and it's just a noise in the background.
Guido, are things more peaceful over there in Tuscany?
At the moment, yes, because Tuscany is quite relaxed, as Federico said, and also the situation is, at the moment, under control. But of course, in Italy, like Federico said, there is a lot of discussion, and people goes to the extreme right and extreme left also here, but in different way, because the dimension of the place where I live is different from the one of Federico. But I see the same.
The same trajectory. The same trajectory.
But again, I think what we should question also, because people never think about this, you should question why the center, now we're talking about extreme left and extreme right, why people, they were so dissatisfied with liberal democracy. That's a very interesting question that we should ask to ourselves, because if people, obviously, they were happy with liberal democracy, there wouldn't be this issue, and this is something I'm thinking, constantly, I just don't want to say, there is the new right extremists and the new left extremists. I wanted to question why the most, wealthy country in the world, they were not able to keep liberal democracy and keep the people happy. So, because probably they have failed, for sure.
Well, one thing that always strikes me is that the United States, being such a big and populous country, only has two major political parties who are fighting, the democracies versus Republicans, and there isn't that much more. But in Italy, on the other hand,
too many.
It's much more diverse. You have 5 or 6 or 7 parties in the parliament, and it's looking in from the outside. It sometimes seems like a mess because you can't count to 10, and Italy has a new government already. But maybe that's more lively and maybe more sustainable in the longer run than having this almost cemented 2-party system that you have in the States. But the hurdles for for founding a new political party and being up there competing with the 2 established ones are so high that basically you have to be a billionaire in order to afford it. And that sort of, maybe from a European perspective where we have much more diverse political systems, maybe it could be somewhat crippling. That's just my input. So, but I don't know. What do I know? You're the artist. You're to talk.
Well, Guido, you want to say something?
No. Go, Federico.
I remember, like, in 1992, I mean, you have to think that people are changing and society is evolving. Like, think about it, like, how Henry Kissinger in the 1970s, he was this incredible figure that, that he was considered the strongest intellectual, and he was adored by European. He was flirting with the Agnelli, he was flirting with all of the Italian and British. I mean, 40 years have passed. He's considered one of the worst, inhumane piece of rubbish that ever exists in American politics. Like, and he's still alive. He's 98. He probably have killed with his strategy 5 million people. Like, or for example, think about, like, a book by Francis Fukuyama, 1992, The End of History and the Last Man. Basically, it was saying that history is finished. It's finished because now we have liberal democracy, and we have basically struggled 2,000 years to reach this sort of government which allow freedom, allow like a liberal market. And now, and of course, the New York Times, this is God, this is new God, and then now, we are in 2020, and all of these idols, they are, boom, falling, like, because nobody seems to like anymore liberal democracy. Or think about, like, now that all of these heroes from the Civil War, like, the conservative faction of the Civil War, they just basically, like, destroying all of this culture. They were there for 200 years. So society is always on the move, like, and probably we have to adjust ourselves that, in order to live a normal life, we have to accept that, there is this self-destructive nature of human being, that once in a while we need a genocide. We need to have a dictator that put us, like, into really deep shit. And then, we have to restart from there, like, because if you look at the history of the war, it seems like it's more like this than something that, is so great and peaceful and wonderful. And, I don't have any other explanation. This is the conclusion that I'm having after living 47 years, like, so, that's what, it's a big question mark, everything, like, so it's not that I want to be negative, because I live a beautiful life, rich of, like, creative, it's a dream life, but at the same time, like, I like to go a bit deeper in the surface, like, so.
Guido, would you like to respond to that?
Well, you said before that in Italy, seen from outside, there's a lot of parties and a lot of chaos. That's true, but also to say that nowadays there are not so much parties. In the parliament, there are 3, 4, 5 parties, not more. And the problem is that I think that neoliberal democracy somehow failed. I see that there is an empty space at the left wing, but also at the right wing, that is not represented in the parliament. And but it's not a little space, it's an enormous space. If you think that at the moment the left wing is represented by the Democratic Party here in Italy, that is very far from many of left instances. And that's why here in Italy I have the same sensation, the same feelings that had Federico, because extreme left and extreme right is just because the response from the neoliberal democracy representative, and at the same time there's the leader parties have no force to put together and to make a solid proposal in this sense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the most clear example of failure of I think of like utopian political system was the Weimar Republic. From 1919 to 1930. I studied the Weimar Republic because I love George Gross, I love Otto Dix, I love all of the German expressionists, and they were living into an extremely liberal society in which they were famous for their vices and complete deregulation of the senses, and what happened, it was the perfect
180. It was a perfect 180.
Yeah, it was
Yes.
the perfect scenario of the rise of an authoritarian government, so you see, well,
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up. Obviously, I'm German, and I grew up in the GDR, in the eastern part of people call it communist part, but it wasn't. It was more the socialism as they were able to manage. And it's, if you look at the entire German history of the 20th century, it's from one extreme to the other, and you have 40 years of the country being separated. And now we just celebrated 30 years of reunification. And I'm always curious how the media and other countries report on that. Because as you probably know, well, this year is really sort of messed up because of COVID-19, but on the larger scale, there are still differences between the East and the West. There's not maybe some animosity still, but economy-wise, the East is much poorer than the West, and people in the East, they thought that maybe after 10 years or after 20 years at least, those differences would have gone away, but they haven't gone away. And it's more of a situation like you have in Italy. You have the wealthy North, and you have the much poorer South. And probably it might continue like this in Germany for another 50 years. So there are differences, and they have to be somehow reconciled by political leaders and also leaders of the economy. And that's not always happening to the full extent. And the internet, just to get back to Guido a little bit again. I mean, it's sort of like people can express all they want, anybody, and maybe despite all the ugliness that we see on social media and whatnot, maybe there's also a little bit of merit in that these days anybody can express themselves. All they need is just a keyboard and the mouse, where in former times maybe they needed to write letters or even before then they didn't have no voice at all. So now we have this everybody's constantly clamoring, and we have all these voices and all these opinions, and this internet thing is like a big there's, I don't know how we're all going to get out of it and maybe somehow treat each other in a more friendly way again, because I believe that the entire topic of discourse, not only narration, narrative as we had before, but also discourse, is something that people maybe need to learn anew, how to talk and communicate each other using the new technologies, but in a civilized manner that has fallen by the wayside in many cases. Guido, you would...
Yeah. Well, I don't think that, yes, of course, new technology changed our way to communicate, but taking a step back to the beginning of our talk, I talked about the first internet, the first period of the internet, because I think that something has changed. I mean, the technology is better than the 90s, the first 2000s, but at the same time, it is changed the paradigm. When we used the net in the media, I'm talking about in the media because it was an experience that involved me and that was so inspiring for me. The model was a model of cooperation. but now we completely lose that kind of interpretation of the internet. Now we live in a model of hyper competition. We are all fighting for attention, for followers, and of course, yes, we are on the internet as we were in the 90s and at the beginning of the 20s, but now it is. There's no more the sense of a community. There is no more the sense of a cooperation. We are all fighting by ourselves to obtain more attention, popularity, and so on. So that's the focus, the important thing about new technologies and political approach and any other.
It's not very different from if you think about, like, war exploration and colonialism. So we are all there to grab in a little bit of space. The corporation will try to use our data to grab a wider market. The individual, they're there to grab 100 new followers. So it's becoming like a soil of conquest, So, and this idea of this utopian idea of is gone forever. That's it. It's gone forever. It's gone forever. Think about the social media, which we all use and which are all, in a way, help us to develop our career and develop contacts and sales, But man, I mean, everything is completely gone. It's just a territory to make money, and this idea of posting a picture of a family, if end up in the hand of corporation to sell you like diapers because you're posting so many pictures of your kids, is perverted completely. There is an escape? No, there is not. Because we became so addicted of make sure that when we post a picture, we have 100 likes, including not just the 20 years old, including the 50 years old, So it's just become something that
Well, it's an addiction, right?
Addiction, absolutely.
It's an addiction. But unfortunately, our time is up. So I'd love to chat much longer with you. But I'd like to give you an opportunity briefly, maybe Guido, you go first, to talk briefly about the works that you're showing at the B3 Biennale. I think it's three different ones, correct?
Yeah. It's three different ones that are about the digital labor, as was said before. The first is the business. And after that, I did two other works that are exploring the idea of digital workers and to investigate their condition, and I try to investigate the work as an art performance. So I asked the worker to perform actions that was at the same time a service sold on the internet, and at the same time a statement revisiting the slogan of social struggle. So they are all picture and moving images that are taken from the worker themselves, and that I put all together in order to create a critical point of view of this kind of new community on the internet. One work is work less, work all, which means that we are all fighting to sell better our services on the internet. So,
okay. Thank you. We're looking forward to that. Federico, you want to briefly talk about American Fables?
Yeah, very briefly. And basically, when I did this piece, I thought about basically what when writer, they put together a book of short story. And I thought, why don't I put together like, a series of like 5 or 6 vignettes, short story, 45 seconds to a minute about, American history. And what about, I tell the story as a sort of like, not like in a very accurate way, but in a sort of like folk tales, a fable. And basically I went to record some of this scene that they I think transmit this sort of like, a fable approach to this narrative. So basically, I believe it's very hard that people will take them seriously because, they are really satirical and very funny, and there is not an attempt to make a point or to denounce a particular leader, but simply to show a war dominated by buffoons, So, and of course, the last episode is dedicated to Donald Trump, dressed as a military dictator. So, that's it.
That's it. Thank you so much, the two of you.
Okay.
Grazie mille.
Grazie.
Arrivederci.
Ciao Guido.
Ciao.
Ciao Diana.
If you want to say some more in Italian, I can't. I can understand it pretty well, though.
Guido, quando mi inviti in Toscana a mangiare una bistecca?
Quando vieni, quando sei in zona, fammi un chiamo, si va a mangiare una fiorentina.
Va bene, ok.
Okay, I got that. I'm going to come too, okay?
Ok.
Bye-bye.
Bye, bye guys. Take care,
Goodbye.
everybody. Bye.